Hi, this is Kylie Koo. Welcome to my studio and welcome to week 2 of creating a positivity deck. I'd like to start by saying a big thank you to everyone who has taken such an interest in the project. So here I am with last week's card, and I've looked at this a few times and just reflected on the card and reflected on the little notes that I'd taken in my journal. Now last week, Helen, who had watched the video, said that my card had reminded her of a poem. It wasn't one that I'd heard of before, so I looked it up and I was really taken by it. So I've decided that I would print it off and I'm just going to add it into my little journal. And it struck me that, this is something you may want to do as well. There may be things that you come along that remind you of your card or just some of the thoughts that you've had. And, those could just be added to your journal as well. So that's something I might be doing in future as I go along. So we remain in the slow down phase. Last week we focused on the word relax, and this week I invite you to focus on the word breathe. Now that word, just like any of the others that I may give you as prompts, will have immediate meaning for you, but perhaps also it will have other connotations for you. And the most obvious is the physical act of breathing. So, before we journal our thoughts, I offer you a number of ways to think about the word breathe. And I'm keeping these within that notion of the slow down state of being. So I'm very much thinking about how breathe also relates to our word from last week, relax. When I think about breathe in this context, I think about the way I use my breathing in a very deliberate way to help me slow down, to relax, perhaps to meditate, and through undertaking a practice such as yoga. And I'm conscious in yoga of the instructor saying to breathe a bit deeper and to stretch into the pose a bit more. I also think about it very much in relation to the sense of smell and the impact that various scents have in helping me slow down. And the third way I think about it is when we use phrases such as breathe life into. Perhaps we realise a project has gone stale or has sat untouched and we decide to breathe life into it. And for me, these are often the things that can nag away at me, those projects undone. And sometimes they stop me from feeling like I can relax because I know that they need done. So, in going to your journal, or in just thinking about this, I invite you to think about the following. What things do you do that help you breathe more slowly, more deeply, and that help you slow down and relax? Also think about the scents and the smells that similarly help you slow down. What are they and where are they? And I would ask you to think about, or invite you to think about, your projects, plans or dreams, those things that have perhaps been on your mind that you've just left for a while, but which you would now like to breathe life into. And similarly, I'm asking those questions of myself and noting them down into my little journal. So I realise that a lot of my things have to do with outdoors, things in the garden, things by the sea, things in woods. And I do recognise that perhaps not everyone is either able to do that or has access to those sorts of things. So what I would say is think about the things that perhaps are more immediately around you, things in your home. It doesn't have to be, going to the ocean or going for a walk in the woods. Those are just the things that resonate with me. But the other things I started to think about that might help others in terms of thinking about how they might answer these questions is the likes of houseplants, pot plants. I pulled here a tiny piece of lavender from my garden, but also herbs, fresh herbs or even dried herbs have a scent to them, and that was just a piece of rosemary. I'm burning a candle. It has a lovely warm vanilla smell. You might even have soaps or bath type items that have a nice scent. So anything at all like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be things out of doors. So I just hope that allows you to think about the types of things that appeal to you when you breathe, breathing them in, and it helps you relax. So I've moved my stuff away and I'm now going to start on my card. And again, I've decided just to put on a kind of thin layer of gesso. And as I did in the previous week, I'm just very much doing this with intention. Just thinking about everything that I'd written in my journal, and actually a couple of other things come into mind, and I go back and note them in my journal for future, just when my card's drying. So very much doing this with intention, so just that thin layer of gesso. So I'm thinking about the colours that call to me, and I take these two chalk sprays. One is Water's Edge and the other is Vintage Olive, and these are two of the colours that I'd actually used on the back of my 12 Slowdown cards. So I just give them a spray, both colours at once. I didn't dry in between. And indeed I hadn't even let the gesso dry because I wanted these to kind of grip the gesso. And then I give them a quick dry. So after sitting with my card for a few moments, I pulled out some of the old drop papers again because I felt that there were some colours in here that perhaps represented some of the notes that I'd put in my little journal. This, for example, reminded me of the sea and of the raindrops. Then I started to look at some of the kind of earthy tones that were in there as well, just little pieces of it. And you'll see me just taking pieces and placing it against a card, just thinking, does this work for me for this card? Again, very much doing it with intention rather than just putting it down without thinking, because I very much want to imbue in this card all the feelings that I'd written into my journal. I see this piece, and at this point this reminds me of a tree trunk. Although, as you'll see later, it morphs into something different. So I just keep trying them back and forward, moving them around, tearing off other little pieces, until I think that I quite like these 3 pieces. But then I'm not so certain. I just give it some thought. I then remember some little pieces that I'd been working on earlier in the week, and I pull them out because it's the kind of colours of these that kind of bring out what I'd been writing, and you'll see that some are more decorated than others. And I like this one because it kind of brings me that sense of the garden. This one because it brings me the sense of being by the sea. And I do kind of swap back and forward between these for quite some time. And the fact that I'm doing this suggests to me that I've not yet found the one that best represents that feeling. So I start to look through some of the others. And then decide on this one, but I feel it's too big. I want something that perhaps might be deemed to be a main focal point on my card, but not something that overpowers it. So I'm just going to make it a bit smaller. Just drawing around the bottom of that bottle, just to give me a slightly better circle. And then once I have the piece, I start to look at that in place. And in some ways, I felt like I could stick that down and then just leave the card at that. There was something about it, just a kind of simplicity of it. But on the other hand, it didn't feel complete for me. But I did sit with it for a while, wondering what to do next. And I did wonder if I wanted the collage pieces on at all. So you'll see me here again, just putting these 3 pieces into place. And deciding that I will in fact glue them down. So just using some matte medium here, just to glue them into place. And again, I'm not rushing this. I'm not going deliberately slow or anything. I'm just doing it with intention, not rushing. I'm in the moment. I'm relaxing. I'm focusing on the word breathe. And just slowly but surely, I put all the pieces into place. I would almost describe this as treating each piece that's sitting there in front of me with a respect for what it is. Doesn't mean to say that it won't change, but there's something about these pieces that just drew me to them. So I'm being careful with them. Because while I didn't know it at the point, they do turn out to be something different than I thought they were going to be. And that quite surprised me. So again, just trying them at this stage. And then I spend again a bit of time just going back and forward, looking at what I actually want to do there. Going back to those other pieces, wondering if in fact they would fit better. But no, I kept coming back to the smaller piece. Although I did feel that it needed something more. I liked it in its kind of simple, undecorated state, but I felt it probably would need something more. However, in the meantime, I decided to go back to the background and just to take some of these colours just to help blend my collage pieces in a bit. So these are fluid acrylics. Don't need a lot of them at all, especially not for a card of this sort of size. So I start here with the green, and this starts to remind me of earth, of the earth, of grass, of the outdoors. And I'm just pulling it over the collaged pieces, just in little bits here and there. I then take this slightly darker green, and again I'm not going to use a lot of it. Just little touches here and there. And while I'm not clear about what's starting to develop here, I just keep going with it, just intuitively. I then take the purple and I put it more towards the top, and I realise that just in terms of its the fact that it's kind of transparent, it starts to pick up with the other colours underneath, and as I spread it out, it almost gives that kind of lavender type colour. So the lavender that I'd written about, I could certainly see, although the lavender didn't have flowers on it at this time of year, I could see that that was actually picking up the thoughts that I have about lavender and the way that lavender helps me breathe. I love to walk around the garden at any time of year, even just now, although it's very cold and very frosty, just rubbing my hands on the lavender. I pick up that lovely scent, and of course in summer when it has its lovely flowers, even more so. So once more I put my small piece on the card, and then it kind of hit me. These were rocks. So I started to go around them with pencil, but it wasn't going to be sufficient. I decided that actually it needed black pen, a black fine liner, to bring it out. And it surprised me because I hadn't mentioned rocks at all. Although you will see from the few things that I sometimes have sitting on my desk that I do like rocks, I like stones, I like pebbles. And as I was doing this, it reminded me that I used to rock climb. Now, as you can imagine, rock climbing can be exhilarating. But I also remember at times when climbing and stopping to take a break, on the end of a rope, and looking around me. And as exhilarating as it was, there was also something relaxing about it. And I can remember looking out from sea cliffs where I was climbing, just looking out across the sea or down at the sea and across it, and just breathing. So even doing things that can sometimes be challenging, can get the adrenaline pumping, I still found that space to breathe and to relax. And I think that's where these rocks came from. Somewhere in my memory, just doing this card, it brought forward that fact that, yes, even under those circumstances, I could breathe. So again, I'm going back to those cards, just looking at what I want and starting to think that I needed to do a bit more detail on my little card. There was features in both of these other ones that I liked and just felt that the little one needed something just to bring it forward and into the fore and to capture more of the feelings. I think in a sense I could have made any of these cards work for it, and maybe on other occasions I would have. But today, and for the exercise I was doing, I just wanted to stick with this smaller one. So now all I'm doing is I'm going to take a white Posca and again a kind of black fine liner and just think about what it is that I want to convey onto here. And again, I'm doing this fairly intuitively. I do think about it a little bit, but it's not that I spend a long time trying to work out what pattern I want. I just try to go with the marks that are already there on the paper. So I just start to map out some of the different colours, just going around the edges, using the white Posca, but it is being absorbed ever so slightly into the paper, but I'll go over it again later. And this in itself is a very relaxing piece of art to do. And again, just going back to my card and thinking, is this sufficient or will I continue on with more? And I decide to continue on. So at this point I've swapped over to a white gel pen, and apologies, I do go right down to the bottom right hand side of the screen here, but I will come back into shot in just a second. So just making circles, and I think these probably represent two things to me. One is air, but the other is probably also the sea. I don't know what all these represent. That could be land. I honestly don't know. It's just, as I sat with it, different things came to me. And so again, I look at it in relation to my card. And just looking at the way that I would want to place it. And once I've decided that, I'll go ahead and glue it down. So now that that's in place, I'll now write my word on. I did manage to transfer a little bit of black ink onto there, but I fixed that. So I decide, just on this bottom rock, that I'll write my word, breathe. I do it first with the gel pen and then I go over it later with the Posca white pen. And this paper was very textured. It was that piece of drop sheet. It did have kind of blobs of paint on it. And, you know, when I look at it later, I think, it's not as good as I would have liked it to be. But the other thing that I did was I sat with it and I did breathe. I took a deep breath and I felt myself look at it and just decide, no, it's fine. I can live with that, and I'm going to let go of the notion that it has to be perfect. So I've gone round the card just with white, and I'm just taking the white Posca and just putting a few final lines onto it. And that is my card done. So I now have the week 2 card, Breathe, and as I did last week, I'll keep this card out on display and I'll look at it from time to time. But the other thing I decided to do was to take the piece of lavender and the piece of rosemary, and I also took this little bit of pampas grass that had been broken off in the wind. I just found it in the garden, and also a little feather from one of my little feathered friends. And I thought what I'd do is just tie these together with a piece of garden twine, and that I would just let that sit again with my card. The lavender and the rosemary very much drawing on that sense of breathe and the things that help me relax when I pick up their scent. So that's it for week 2. I do hope that you've enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing what you create. Thank you to all those of you who are sharing in the Facebook group, and also those on Instagram. So have a good week, remember to breathe, and hope to see you again next week. Bye for now.